Next, we want to start talking about processes. And our process is defined as a collection of work activities, actions, and tasks. We previously talked about the process framework and some of the umbrella activities. What we've not looked at so far is how do we work through the process flow? That is, how do we move from one section to another underneath the framework? There are 4 major process flows that we're going to use and see. We're going to talk about these just at a high level now, and then we'll talk in more detail about them coming up. The first is the linear process. In this flow, you move from one step of the framework to the next step, then to the next, etc. This is often seen in old-style software engineering, and is very lockstep. The next is an iterative process flow, in which case, after each step, you return back to communication step, and you just check real quick and make sure, hey, are we getting this right? Can we verify that things are correct? If we can, this allows us to fix issues that were found and before we move on to the next step. That way, issues don't get too big, kind of like a snowballing effect where a little mistake here grows bigger and bigger and bigger. By always going back to the client and verifying, hey, is this working correctly? Then we make sure that we're on track. This works best if we have direct access to the customer or client. Now, this usually means it's going to be an internal client. So this was a process I used a lot when I was doing software development. I did a lot of work for internal customers, which would be like going to the accounting department and talking to one of the head accountants and saying, is this the report the way you need it to be? Or is this the way we're going to calculate paid time off? I would go to HR and say, is this the new electronic form that you're wanting? Is there anything extra that you need to have to it that maybe you forgot about? I go to the training department and we would talk about scheduling and different things like that. Whatever they needed for their project, we'd go in and make sure something didn't get triggered in their mind or that I didn't misinterpret something. And these would just be nice informal meetings because they were generally small clients, and we just go and talk to them for a few minutes. Usually 30 minutes or less, and it was great for keeping things on track. In comparison, a parallel workflow is better when you have a really large project. And what happens is you are working on different steps at the same time. Because what happens is you split your project up into smaller tasks. Remember, we said that's one of the things you can do during planning, is you can take a big project and figure out, how do I split it up? And by splitting up a really big project into small sections, each one can be treated as a mini project. And so you have different people working in different sections. The nice thing is if you have someone who's really good at communicating with customers, maybe they start on this part of the project, and then you start the next part, and it has a parallel flow, and they get to be reused over here. Maybe it's just completely independent teams. I've seen that work well also. The goal is to take this major project and to get it moving forward. And so the larger the project, the better a parallel is going to work. Now, it is going to have problems if you're going to have lots of integrations. And sometimes you'll run into what they call a blocking process. That means that you have 3, 4, 5 tracks going, and then 3 of them get held up because this one is running behind. It still is often more effective and efficient than treating it as one big project moving forward. So that's something we're willing to deal with. And sometimes we can move people around to help things out if necessary. Finally, we have what's known as the evolutionary flow process. And this is used where we constantly go through those steps, but we take that big project, break it down into a really, really small chunk, and then we circle back, going back to the communication step and starting all over with the customer. Hey, is this what you were hoping for? Is this what you're expecting? And we ensure that's correct and it's signed off on before it's actually released. The goal is to do this on every few weeks to a month. And so you often find this in an agile software development process. And a lot of people have used and moved to an agile development process for IT hardware systems as well. So we work on rolling out little changes and making sure that they're correct. And then we add more, and then we add more, and we add more. And this process, when you first look at that first month, is like, this isn't correct at all. Well, we know that there's things that are missing. How about what we built? Okay, that's good. All right, let's move to the next section. Let's move to the next section. And as it gets bigger and bigger, it looks more and more like a final thing. And because you're constantly developing and going back to the customer, the goal is to not having those hidden surprises like, oh, we forgot about. Therefore, it's delivered fully featured when it's completely done. So those are just 4 process control flows that you're going to see. Like I said, we're going to talk about them in more detail later on. This is to give you kind of a heads up with where we're going and what you're going to see. All 4 are different and all 4 have their place. The question is knowing when do you use the correct process flow for the correct time.